So yeah, if you're interested in learning about mobile apps, you're in the right talk. If you want to learn about privacy, which is way more boring, that's next door. So just in case you're in the wrong room. So my name is Christopher Williamson, and just give you a quick overview of what I'm talking about today so you can decide whether or not you want to bail and go over the privacy talk. I'll be introducing myself briefly, giving you an overview of the different mobile platforms, which I actually added at the last minute because it occurred to me some of you guys actually might not be familiar with some of these mobile devices. So I'm just going to give you kind of a quick overview of that. Definitely talking about the development tools, which seems to be what most of you are most interested in hearing about. I'll be giving a lot of detail in particular on the two products that I'm most familiar with, which are PhoneGap and Unity. And then I'll be talking more about the business side and the sales side of the mobile platform, and kind of covering the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. So as far as who I am, many of you guys know me. I've been in this conference for many, many years. Got a degree from CU, worked at IBM for a while, founded my own company, DreamQuest Software, in 2000, and won a couple awards at the Independent Games Festival. We did a lot of stuff back on Palm and Pocket PC, and won quite a few mobile awards for that. I kind of took a break from that for a while, and was lead developer on Madagascar 2 for PlayStation, and it was an opportunity to work with Activision and DreamWorks and the Shrek characters and all, and it was like a dream come true for me, so I just couldn't pass it up. So it was fun. I got a chance to work on a AAA title. But in the end, I ended up kind of coming back to my own. For a little while, I did actually a short stint with the Air Force doing real games, serious games. And probably the thing that's most relevant, at least to me, is I have a daughter that loves playing games. So, so Dreamcast, we do family games. So cardboard and puzzle games are probably what we're most known for. And in the past, we did Palm Mobile, as I mentioned, and we've been slowly porting our catalog over the last couple months over to iOS and Android. So we had a catalog of like 16 some odd games that we're basically porting kind of all at once. So it was a pretty major undertaking. So to give you kind of an overview of the mobile platforms. So this may be, obvious for most of you guys, but for a few people, I'm sure it isn't. So you'll hear me refer to iOS, and iOS actually refers to 3 different platforms. There's iPod Touch, which are iPod devices that actually can run applications, most of them. iPhone, which most of you are familiar with, I'm sure, and then iPad, the tablet devices. And iOS can refer to that whole section of all 3 of those types of devices. Android, which includes both phones and tablets. Tablets in particular have been doing pretty well with Android lately, and I think that's a very fast growing and very interesting market, particularly perhaps for you guys as designers. Windows Phone 7, BlackBerry, Symbian, HP, Bada, gaming platforms like DS and PlayStation. These are sort of the smaller guys, but there's quite a few. Thankfully, the market's actually not as fragmented as when I started. There was Nokia, and there was like LG, and there's like dozens of different platforms, all had their own proprietary stuff. It was very hard to develop an application that would run on a large number of devices. And as it stands today, if you develop an application for iOS and Android, you're going to probably hit 80 or so % of the smartphone handsets, which I think are 80 or 90% of the phones being sold today, even in China. So smartphones are definitely the standard now going forward. One area that I think is worth looking at is, it's technically they're not really mobile devices, but there are a lot of GPSs, cars, homes, TV. There's actually a new console coming out called the Ouya, which is Android-based, and there are a lot of platforms that are sort of mobile-like, and those platforms are going to be growing and growing. So you may want to be thinking about, if is there a potential fit for your particular vertical or your particular platform, where in-car entertainment system or a home security system or something like that might actually be a place for you to potentially get your app. I don't know. But there's going to be a huge growth in that market. And then, of course, Windows 8 Metro as well. So there are basically 3 main ways you could develop a mobile app today if you wanted to. The first, and it's probably a bit surprising to most of you, and that's why I actually mentioned it first, because I think it's actually maybe the best solution for a lot of you guys that are considering bringing your applications over to mobile, which is consider doing a mobile web app instead. Instead of making a full standalone app, consider doing, is there a way you could do this, deliver this in some sort of a mobile web platform? There's a huge number of, HTML 5 is supported on, and I wish I had stats, but I don't. It's supported on the vast majority of mobile devices, though, including both iOS and Android. HTML5 was embraced pretty early on most of your mobile smartphone handsets. So that's a really good platform to consider developing your application. And you can do a lot in HTML5. You can do games, you can do offline content, you can do client server, you can do a lot of stuff that you probably wouldn't think you could do on a mobile, on a web app. You can do that in HTML5. So I would seriously take a look at that. It may be able to deliver what you guys need and provide a lot of cross-platform support for you. So the second option would be to build natively. And that's what Greg Seelhoff and a lot of the other folks here have done, which basically means you develop one Java code base and develop an Eclipse for Android, and you develop a Objective-C code base in Xcode for iOS. And the advantage of that, obviously, you're going to have the best ability to integrate with libraries and native hardware when you're using that kind of platform. You're going to have direct access to debugging and some greater things. Personally, you can see from all those games I had to port, I don't want to do 14 games on like 3 different platforms and end up with like 50 code bases, and that's like a nightmare. So no way. So if you've got several applications you're doing, this is kind of a challenging option. So the third option, which is the one I'll be talking the most about today, are using some sort of cross-platform framework. So the advantages there, obviously, you've got a single code base that you can use across multiple platforms and multiple devices. So back in 2011, when I was interested in doing this initially, porting our catalog over, I did a pretty extensive tool search, and I went out and looked in like 16, as I said, I had 16 games I needed to port over. So the criteria that I had is it absolutely had to support iPhone and Android. Those were no-brainer platforms we had to support. Other stuff was interesting but not critical. It had to have professional development tools. That's really key. I can't tolerate, I grew up doing Linux and GDB and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like once you've got Microsoft Visual Studio, it's really hard to go back. And so it had to be something where I could set breakpoints and do sort of professional level type work. So, and the primary development platform had to be Windows, just because that's what most of my developers and most of my consultants want to be using. Although the irony is that's actually changed since I did it in 2011, but that was the case back then. And this is, you can see I had a little sort of mind map of all the platforms. I guess I used Appcelerator, Unity, Mobi One, PhoneGap, OpenPlug, Eclipse Studio, Corona, AirPlay, can't even read the bottom one there. Anyway, so I looked at quite a few different platforms, and the 2 favorites that kind of quickly emerged to me were PhoneGap and Unity. And PhoneGap is, they're very different solutions. PhoneGap is an HTML5 offline solution, so basically you sort of develop, if you have a mobile web app and you want to develop an offline version of it, PhoneGap is a great choice for that. So it's particularly good for ebooks and a lot of the applications that you guys would probably develop in. PhoneGap would probably be my initial choice. Appcelerator is a very, very close second. They're almost tied. You'll see in a future slide I'll talk a little more about Appcelerator versus PhoneGap to help you kind of decide, but they're very similar in competing products. And then Unity, which is a proven game engine. It's delivered some AAA titles. And back when I did this in 2011, it wasn't as popular. In the last year and a half, it's grown tremendously. So it's become almost the de facto indie development platform. So here's a really, really packed slide, and I apologize, I try not to pack a lot into a slide, but this is the one that's pretty, it's got a lot, but this is probably the one slide you guys may want from me. So, so I'm just going to kind of give a quick overview. The 5 sort of major frameworks that sort of were most interesting, I thought, to this audience and relevant today were PhoneGap, Appcelerator, Unity, Corona, and Sprout Core. And I'm just going to kind of quickly go over each and kind of what the strengths and weaknesses are for each, and then give you guys a chance to ask questions, because I'm sure there'll be quite a few. And then I'll go into a little more detail on PhoneGap and Unity specifically. So at the top there you can see what platforms they support. So you can see PhoneGap, for example, has by far the widest platform support. If you want to target a lot of mobile platforms, some of the smaller platforms like Windows Mobile, Windows Phone, HP, and Bada, and so on, PhoneGap will be a great choice for you. Appcelerator and Unity stick to sort of the more mainstream stuff. Sprout Core is kind of an odd thing. It's sort of a client-server tool set. It's not really quite a framework, but it felt like it was relevant to include because it might be particularly of interest to this audience. It's very helpful for doing client-server applications. It was helpful, I know Apple used a lot of it for doing iCloud type functionality. So if you have data that you want to share across multiple platforms, it might be something you want to look at. It's very Model View controllers, client server sort of focused, and it can be a toolkit that could be useful for you guys on your apps. So PhoneGap is really best for web and form-based apps, and so is Accelerator. If I had to compare the two, probably the major difference between the two is that PhoneGap has a very generic UI. So if you want the app to look the same on all your devices, which is usually what most of us want, even though we shouldn't, that may be what you want to go for. If you want to go for something that looks more native on iOS or on Android, then Accelerator is a better choice because it will basically map, the controls to a native iOS control or to a native Android control. And the differences are fairly significant. If you're an Android user and you're used to looking at a control that works a certain way, and you suddenly have this generic one, it can be very confusing. So, especially if you're targeting a specific platform, if you're targeting, iPad specifically or Android specifically, you really want to try and follow the user interface conventions on that particular platform, because the way they do, text entry fields, for example, or the way they do a drop-down list, or the way they do data entry, or the way they look up a contact, all those kinds of things are actually quite different between iOS and Android. And Accelerator does a very good job of kind of wrapping that for you, so you can have the native support on the big particular platform that you want. Then Unity obviously is a great choice for doing either 2D or 3D games. It's also become a pretty growing platform for doing data visualization and other, I was actually surprised when I went to the Unity conference. I'd say less than half of the people at the conference were game developers. About 2/3 of them were not game developers. I was very surprised. They were people doing data visualization, they were people doing simulations, serious business folks using Unity for doing, for creating environments and such on the devices. And the cross-platform is a huge thing. Corona is a good choice for doing 2D games. Unity honestly actually isn't the best platform for doing 2D games. It's gotten better since when I started, but it's really designed for doing 3D. So I'm actually kind of using it a little bit, for not its original purpose. Gotchas, as I see it, the ones that I've run into with PhoneGap the most, definitely there's a limited HTML5 set of implementation. So HTML5 is a pretty wide spectrum of stuff you can do. So you can't just simply create, a browser app that runs great in, say, Chrome, for example, and then immediately pop it into PhoneGap and expect that it's going to work. There's a limited subset of functions you can use, and you have to kind of stay within the lines and follow the rules, and if you do, then your app will run. Accelerator has a lot of venture capital that was put into it, and I'm not really sure where the revenue is. They used to charge, but PhoneGap was kicking their ass so badly they couldn't charge, so they stopped charging. But I'm not really sure where their revenue is, so I'm always kind of a little nervous when I can't figure out how a company is going to make money or survive. And so I'm not sure what Accelerator's motive is or how they're going to compete. But they do offer a very good product, so you should definitely take a look at that if you're looking at PhoneGap. Unity is obviously a bit overkill if you're doing business applications or 2D. It may or may not be the best choice. Corona, my frustration with Corona really is that it just doesn't scale up very well. If you're doing a small, fairly simple 2D game, it's probably a great choice. If you want to do, if you want something that'll scale up and do a larger, more complicated game, Corona may not scale up in the way that you want. And it's also, it uses Lua, which is an interpreted language, so it's a little on the slow side. And then Sprout Core, probably my biggest complaint there is that I've seen from, and I don't know, Sprout Core is what I know the least about of all of these. But from what I've seen, there's been a lot of complaints that it doesn't play well with other APIs, so you pretty much have to use their solution or you pretty much have to, you can't mix and match, which is always a challenge for me because I always want to mix and match stuff. So languages I put up here because most of you guys are developers, and that's your immediate question usually is which language would I be using and so on. And a good number of them actually offer you a fair amount of flexibility. PhoneGap and Accelerator are both HTML5, CSS, JavaScript programming. Accelerator lets you also do stuff in PHP. Unity uses a hybrid approach, which is actually kind of cool. You can actually do development in C#, JavaScript, or Boo, which is sort of like their version of Python. And you can mix and match. So you can have part of your app developed in C#, you can have part of it done in JavaScript. And actually they do mix and match with all of their modeling as well. So you can bring in models from
Maya or 3D Studio Max or you know, I'm trying to remember the name of Google's free 3D thing. I can't remember it, but anyway, you can bring in models from a bunch of different things, and you can kind of mix and match them all together in the same game, and that's really pretty cool. I've never really seen that. Usually, it's like, hey, this is the language you use, and you will like it. And Corona uses Lua, so if you're a huge Lua fan, you definitely might want to be looking at Lua at Corona. I also put up the licensing. Most of these apps are actually, most of these things are free, but the licensing is a little tricky. So I was, I did a little research to make sure you guys can know exactly what. I mean, PhoneGap is true open source. So if you're looking for something that's here to stay, that's not going to go away, that you can go in and tweak and twiddle, to do whatever you need, PhoneGap is definitely a good choice. AppSlider is Apache Public, which I don't know entirely exactly where that stands on the spectrum. I know it's not open source, but it's somewhere in between. And then Unity and Corona are both proprietary, so you don't get access to any of their source code. Then Sprout Core is an MIT license. So cost-wise, pretty much all of them are free for the base level, except for Corona, which I think is $199 per platform. I don't think they have a free version, at least as far as I know. How they kind of make money is a little bit, it looks like I better got to plug in some power. Yeah. We'll live life on the edge. We're okay. Okay, so how do they make money? Because my first question whenever I look at these tools is like, okay, where are they going to get me, right? So PhoneGap is going to get you if you want to use the remote building process, which is pretty cool, and I'll show you that in a minute, and for various add-ons. AppCelerator charges you for cloud and some of their premium services, and that may change. Like I said, they've sort of recently switched to free, and I don't quite know, like I said, where their monetization is going to come from, and it has to come from somewhere. They've got VCs that they got to repay, so they'll be doing something at some point. Unity is free for the base level, and then it's $1,500 per developer seat for the pro version. But I have seen a lot of apps, like I'd probably say most of the apps actually are developed using the free version of Unity that are currently on the App Store. I mean, the ones that are done by AAA titles and the ones done by larger companies usually are done with the pro version. And so the big difference you'll see is a Unity splash screen that you get on startup that you have to have if you have the free version, and then you don't have quite as much access to some of the native SDK, some of the fine tuning and profiling and sort of the more advanced features are in pro. But you could totally develop a solid game on the free version of Unity. So I wouldn't let that $15 price tag scare you away. And the one nice thing is it is also there's no runtime fee, there's no ongoing fee, they generally don't charge for updates. And so once you pay that fee, if you're a studio like ours that has a lot of games, if you're doing several, it's a pretty good deal because then you're not paying per game or per title. So, any questions on this? I know there's a lot of stuff on here, so I'm sure there's questions that you guys have specific about specific platforms and costs and such. Yeah.
I know you're a game developer, but this applies to all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Unity and Corona are really more specifically for games. PhoneGap and AppCelerator are most definitely, cross-platform choices would be excellent for apps. Unity might be, depends on what kind of app you're doing, but if it was some sort of, like I said, visualization or simulation type thing, Unity might be a great choice still. Any other questions? Okay. So moving on, I'm going to talk a little bit more about PhoneGap, which is probably of the most interest to this audience here. And these are the strengths. And my knowledge of PhoneGap, I'll be honest, is about 6 months old. So it has changed a little bit since then. So it's possible that there's newer, cooler stuff since then. But this is my knowledge as of about 6 months ago. The biggest thing I think probably that PhoneGap's got going for it really is leveraging your existing web HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skills. And this is good because you guys probably all have some experience in that right here in this room. And it's also a heck of a lot easier to find a developer that's got these skills than a guy that's got C# or Unity skills. You're going to probably have to pay a lot more if you go on VWorker or something like that to get somebody with those skills than you will with this. So that's a big plus for cost. It does support a huge number of platforms. So if you want a wide and mobile platform support, PhoneGap again is an excellent choice. It's currently free and mostly open source. One of the things that I really like about it is you can basically build your app as an online app in WebKit and then convert it over to PhoneGap. So you sort of have a bit of a stepping stone approach you can take to this. You can start building it as an HTML5 open WebKit app, And then, because PhoneGap is built on top of WebKit, and for those that aren't familiar with WebKit, WebKit is an extension that's used in the Chrome browser, and it's used in the Safari browser, and a couple others. It's not used in Firefox, and it's not used in IE, but it's a sort of standard HTML5 sandbox that you can do apps for. And so you can basically build your whole app in WebKit, test it out on Chrome, play around with it, and basically it's a regular website with some fancy things, and then convert it over to your offline app in a fairly quick process. They have great online support, they have a really solid dev community. You can do development on Windows, Linux, or Mac, so you've got pretty much your platform of choice for doing your development on. And personally, I love their server-based build system. It's really awesome. I wish I had this. So for those of you that don't do continuous integration and don't have your own build server, I'm actually utterly shocked. How many of you have automated build servers? 2, wow, that's 3, okay, that's depressing. Okay, well anyway, for all of you that don't have one, this is really pretty sweet. So I'm going to give you a really quick demo of it because it's just really pretty cool. Looks like I'm going to talk about challenges first, so I'll come back to the build system in a minute. So the weaknesses for PhoneGap. JavaScript really is a pretty limited programming language. If you want to build a full-featured app with a lot of code base, JavaScript isn't really the best choice. In my mind, it's not very object-oriented, and it's not, it tends to result in very long, script code. I'm sure you guys are all programmers. I probably don't need to go into this. So, it's not a very good choice for games or other graphical apps. Your ability to control the graphics that show on the screen and play music and sound and things like that isn't quite as good as it would be, obviously, with something like Unity. You definitely get a performance hit because it does run in the WebKit browser. And even though your app is an app, it's basically launching a WebKit browser and then running your app inside of that WebKit browser. So, and I'll give you a demo of it, one of our apps that's developed in PhoneGap, so you can kind of see what it looks like. It looks just like a regular app. You wouldn't know that it was developed in this, but it does give you a bit of a performance hit. One of the nice things that is good is it looks the same on all the platforms, which is something that we wanted because we got so many games. We're trying to keep a kind of consistent look. And as much as I grew up being a user interface junkie, and I'm violating all the rules and all the books about what you're supposed to do, I do it anyways. So, but games, you can sort of get away with it a little bit more. If you're looking for native, AppCelerator is a better choice. Standalone tools, one drawback I've definitely noticed is the standalone tools work best on Mac. Even though they claim to support Linux, Windows, and Mac, it's quite clear that their primary development platform is Mac. And when I used their product on Mac, it worked great. When I used it on Windows, it kind of half worked. And when I used it on Linux, it took like many forum posts and debug help and so on to get it all the libraries and everything installed and get it actually working. So, one of the questions with PhoneGap that's out there is PhoneGap got acquired by Adobe about a year ago, and it's unclear sort of what Adobe's going to do to monetize it. So just like with AppCelerator, I don't quite know what's PhoneGap has got a pretty big user community at this point. I think it'd be pretty hard for them to just suddenly start charging for it. But to keep in mind, Adobe owns it now, and Adobe's definitely in the business of making money, so they'll figure out some way to monetize it. Oops. So the build system I mentioned is really awesome. You don't need one of the biggest things, and I haven't mentioned this, this is more on the biz side, but if you want to build for iOS, you have to have a Mac. Pretty much, you have to. Apple makes sure that that's the case. So, so if you don't have a Mac now, that's a problem. But one thing that is nice about PhoneGap is you actually don't need a Mac, because they will basically use their Mac to do the build for you. And you can upload and submit all your certificates and everything to them, and they will manage all of it for you and just spit out. So basically you can zip up your files into a little zip file, upload it to their website, and bam, you get an APK for Android, you get an IPA for Mac, for iOS, and away you go. And it's just really slick. So for beginners, when I first started, I thought this was awesome. They even had little QR codes on here, so you just like take your phone and go blink, and it just downloads it. It's really very slick. So I highly recommend it, and it will download your app directly to your device. So that's really pretty sweet. So I'll have this available on online, and I'm not sure where we're putting our presentations, but John Franco, are we putting our presentations somewhere?
Right now on my computer.
right now on your computer. Okay, I'll be happy to share. There's a lot of information here, but there's a good getting started slide here. So this will give you some links and so on if you want to go out there and get started with PhoneGap. This will give you, where you want to be going to kind of get started. So you're going to want to register on that build thing that I told you about. There's some great tutorials out there. There's even some books available on PhoneGap at this point. So I'm going to move on to Unity. So Unity's strengths are wide number of platforms, not quite as many as PhoneGap. One of the things that's actually cool is even consoles are supported by Unity. So if you want to do Xbox or Wii or PlayStation, you can even do that with Unity. There's a fair number of commercially successful games. EA did Tiger Woods on Unity for web, and it's a very highly polished game. That was actually even like a couple of years ago. So there's been quite a few commercially successful games, and they're really pushing hard for the AAA community, and they're getting a fair amount of response now. It used to be more indie focused, and now they've really done a lot of polished work. One of the things I love about it is I can develop equally on Windows or Mac. So I literally have half my developers have Macs, and artists, and half of them have Windows, and we totally just check in code back and forth, and it just all works. It's beautiful. I've never seen anything work quite that smoothly before. So I like being platform agnostic and not mandating that people use a particular thing, and that's really sweet for that. And I'm sorry, John Franco, there's no Linux yet, but maybe soon. They announced the Linux client for the next version, so maybe we'll get an IDE soon. They do have support for a wide number of 3D tools. As I mentioned, one of the things that's really cool about Unity is you can just drop in like files from, drop in your WAV files and your PSDs and your models, and it's just like poof, they just automatically like go in your project and work. And from a pipeline standpoint on a game, that's huge because it means basically my artist can modify a file and check it into the code base, and the next time my developer checks out the code along with the new art, it'll automatically, the project file doesn't need to get updated, doesn't need to get synced or anything like that. It just automatically pulls the latest art asset and uses it in-game. And that's pretty huge when you've got a larger team. As I mentioned already, you can do scripting in 3 different languages, which is nice as well. And again, they also have a strong community, et cetera, et cetera. So what are some of the challenges with Unity? The IDE definitely crashes sometimes. It's obviously best for games and VR type applications. Unity uses this metadata stuff, which is kind of cool, but it's also kind of a nightmare for versioning control if you want to do diffs and things like that. There's not only you have your scripting files, which are normal text files that you can check in and diff and do all that kind of stuff with, but some of the data is like this magic stuff that you do in the IDE where you move it around and click on things and choose drop-down lists, and it's all really cool. But at the end of the day, that gets saved into some binary blob somewhere that it's really hard to kind of diff and maintain. And coming from the early days as a programmer, that I don't like magic. Magic's cool, but it's kind of annoying too. You definitely have to understand a little bit about 3D. Even if you're doing a 2D app, you have to learn a little bit about 3D to get it. And the build client is fairly large on Unity, so that means, if your app is, you're going to add about 3 to 4 megabytes onto any app that you do to add the Unity player on it, basically. So that's not a huge deal. You can still, all of our games, for example, are all still under the 10 meg Wi-Fi download limit, over-the-air download limit. But if you're concerned about size, I don't think size is such a big deal anymore. It's sort of becoming not a concern. And it can be costly for a mid-sized company. So licensing, people usually ask, that's the main thing they're asking is what's the cost? Like I said, it's free. There is a pro 30-day trial that you can get easily, and they'll actually extend it several times. It does cost $1,500 for the pro version on Windows. The biggest hit for you guys really is there's a $400 cost for Android or iOS Basic. So what that really means is basically it's probably going to cost you $400 to do Android and $400 to do iOS, which I don't think is that expensive. So now getting into the juicy stuff. I'm going to probably plug my power in just so I don't run out. Any questions while I'm shuffling for my power cord? No questions. Okay. Okay.
You said something about the, I'm not sure what word you used, specifically targeting iOS or on Android. Am I to understand from that each individual platform that you're targeting has an incremental cost to it?
You're talking about for Unity now, the incremental cost? Yeah, so the desktop versions of Unity are free, the basic ones, and it's $400 for iOS and $400 for Android. There was a brief period where they were offering it for free, and I think they will probably eventually go free for that as well, but that's not the case at the moment. And you do get the credit towards the $1,500 Pro later if you choose to upgrade. So.
Pro includes
No, it's Pro. Pro is per platform. So if you want Pro Windows, Pro iOS, and Pro Android, it's $4,500. So, but you really don't need Pro. You can do a lot. I mean, I've got only me and my lead artist have the Pro version. Everybody else on my team, all my interns and such, are all using the free version and doing just fine. That used to actually be a problem to intermix like that, but it isn't anymore, because I think they were having too many studios like ours that had, it's like there's no way I'm paying $1,500 for an intern to get a copy of Unity. All right, so getting to the biz stuff. Any more questions on the tools? Wow, I expected tons of questions. You guys seem like all developer tool people. So, all right, you're all being shy. Okay, well, let's talk about the business side of things now. So, because that's what a lot of you guys are equally into the business stuff. So, I went pretty hard to try and get current metrics. It's kind of hard sometimes. I hate when I go to mobile talks and they've got slides from like 2010 and even 2011, because the mobile space is moving so fast. The statistics from 2 years ago are almost. So I thought this was a pretty interesting slide here, and it shows the growth of not just desktop PCs and notebook PCs, smartphones and tablets over time. And you can see, tablet PCs in particular, I think, have a significant growth. We're going to see a lot of growth in the next couple of years. And so for those of you guys that are doing apps, they could be, especially business type apps, I think the tablet, is where you should probably be looking at first, perhaps versus smartphone. Because there's definitely going to be some pretty significant growth in that space. And then this is a really complicated graph, but it actually shows a lot of really interesting data. So I'm going to try and explain it here. So what you're seeing here is this shows iPad on the top, iPhone in the middle, and then Android on the bottom, which are sort of your three primary platforms. And iPad and iPhone really are sort of two different platforms, the way the App Store works and the way people expect the app to be. So, so you should be thinking about them sort of really, they're not just one platform. So what this shows here is the graph on the top shows the average price point for these particular categories that are along the bottom: books, education, health and fitness, etc. And then the little sort of pie thing on the bottom shows the popularity of that particular category. So obviously games are like this giant red blob on there, but you can also see that the average price point on games is like the worst of all the categories. So well, the reason why I thought this slide would be interesting to you guys is if you look at the categories that sort of have the most popularity and the most dollar value, there are tools and productivity on the far right there. There's business on the left, and then there's personalization and social stuff and music and video in kind of the middle there. And particularly the business side and tools and productivity, and then actually fitness was another big one. Where's that at? Health and fitness. Look at the health and fitness average app price is like $20 from Android, and it's $34 on iPad. I mean, so you could definitely charge more for an app than 99 cents or $1.99. So I think the good news for this audience is you guys might actually be able to make more money at mobile than I ever have, because you can charge more for your apps, I think. And the app growth rate for a lot of the business apps and stuff, I mean, it used to be that, I've been seeing many more iPads and Android app tablets actually being used in the business workplace, and I think that's only going to be growing. It's much easier to carry an iPad around than a laptop. And I'm not quite there. I actually tried going to one conference and I got rid of my laptop and brought just the iPad, and it actually worked, so.
Question?
Yeah?
That was a pretty impressive chart. I'm curious though, where you got the data for?
Distimo did it, and I don't really know. I was looking around for things to find the categories in particular, because I wanted to kind of show the different categories and where it made money, because my gut feeling was that business apps and tools and such made good money, but I didn't have any facts to back it up. So I wanted to actually get some data to show you guys, and this is what I found. So yeah, I don't know who Distimo is. I'm sure there's some very important data aggregator, but well, I'm gonna take a quick side note because I forgot. I meant to show that earlier and I kind of totally forgot, especially since Sue was kind enough to get us this overhead here. So this is Ace's Poker Guide to Hold'em. This was actually our first mobile app that we did, and we did this in PhoneGap. And so this is kind of a like an ebook that teaches you how to play poker. So you can kind of flip through it. So, on like iPad in particular, people expect to flip. It's like a book. So in your app, you're gonna have to, think about, that's one of the things you're gonna have to be thinking about is just your own input and how the devices are different. Like we pull down here, oops. I pull down to bring up the table of contents. And so, the interfaces are a little bit different on the different platforms. But I wanted to show this. This is most definitely not a game. I mean, this is probably an ebook would be the closest thing to say. Ebooks right now are doing really, really well and making a ton of money on Amazon and other places. So that's another area to consider. If you're looking for a stepping stone in the mobile space, an ebook may be something to consider doing because they're selling very well and doing very well. And this app actually is outselling our Hearts game at the moment because nobody can find our Hearts game, but they can at least find this. So anyway, so I want to show this. So this is PhoneGap. You can see, basically this is a web page kind of with, graphics and text and such. And you can lay it out and get pretty precise about how you want things to work. And you can, do some animations. You'll see you get some simple animations and stuff in there. You can do that. So it's not just a static web page. And then I'll briefly show one of our apps developed in Unity. And it's telling me that I need to. So, here we can have lots of glitter and sparkle and, some cool animations and such and show. And you can do animation. And so you can see this is clearly a 2D app. So you can most definitely do 2D apps in Unity. We got menus. So this game is free, and so we make all of our money off the add-ons. So if people want to, cheat, for example, is one of the more popular ones, or get rid of the ads, or get a more complicated, more difficult, challenging game, more variations, etc., then they buy the ads. So that's that. I'll get back to that in a minute. Move on to the biz stuff. What are you doing? Okay, so the bad. And there's a lot of it. So keep in mind the costs to enter the mobile space are probably a lot bigger than you might think. So you're going to have to purchase test devices. The simulators and emulators don't work. I mean, they work, but you're not going to be able to do any real significant testing on them. So expect that you're going to have to plop down money and actually buy yourself an iPad and an iPhone and an Android and da-da-da-da. You need to register on each development platform. It costs about $100 a year. So you have to register on Android, you have to register on Apple, and they're quite happy to take your money. And in the case of iOS, they make it very hard for you to debug and do test builds. So you actually have to, you get a limited number of provisioning profiles, and it's a big pain in the ass. You have to register your device and then have a list of approved people that can then download your app. With Android, you don't have any of that. You can just build a debug build, plop it up, and ship it out to your device without any special provisions. So it's definitely a lot easier for sort of do-it-yourselfers to use Android than iOS. You're probably going to want some kind of third-party libraries for things like in-app purchasing or social media integration or support for GPS or location-based stuff or accelerometer or any of those various things. Unless you're going to do it all in-house, you're probably going to want some kind of third-party libraries, so you need to factor that into your costs. You may need some kind of consulting or expert help to get your app done the first time. I know when we did our first app out, it didn't get, or we were having issues with the certificates. We couldn't get it built, and we had to get somebody to help us figure it out because Apple doesn't really provide much support. You definitely need extra QA and testing time because you're talking about all these different platforms and all these different devices. And then you're also going to have potentially certification and app submission delays. When we submit an app to the App Store, it takes between a week and 2 weeks for it to actually go live. And so, you got to factor that into your schedule as well. And then one thing you may not think about, we didn't, is that you're going to need to create mobile versions of your website. Because if you're selling mobile apps, well, people are probably going to be coming to your website on a mobile device, which means up to now you may have said, mobile device, whatever, But if you want to have if you're going to be selling, Android apps, you better be able to buy your Android app or find out about it on your website, and you need a mobile version. So the ugly, and this is the really big ugly, is the monetization stuff. So there's multiple app stores out there. They're all walled gardens. There's an extra submission time, so they basically control everything. So you can sit there and, I've actually sent multiple tickets to Google. I've never had one answered, ever. So that's kind of depressing, when something doesn't work right and you're like, I don't know, our app wasn't listed, our poker guide didn't show up on the Android store for like months. And I had no idea why it didn't show up. And one day it just magically showed up. So I have no idea. And that can be very frustrating when you can't reach a human being to help. The price points are way lower. The average price of an app is around $1.99. And you saw that previous slide. It's definitely a lot better for business and productivity and tool type apps. But that's definitely, even in the business and tool area, there's no way. There's not no way you can get hundreds of dollars for your app, but it's pretty atypical. You're gonna have a hard time, I think, selling your business app for more than 10 or 20 bucks on mobile. One big thing you need to really think about is you're going to be running on different resolutions. You need to handle screen rotation. As you saw, the iPad here can flip. So, for example, you'll notice if I take the device here and flip it, my app automatically detects that and flips its own rotation around. We actually don't support portrait because our game just doesn't work very well in it, so we sort of ignore you if you do that. But if you're a business app, you probably need to run in both portrait and landscape mode, and you need to think about that in your design. And resolutions are a big issue. iPad 3 is actually running at like 2048 by, it's like this ridiculous resolution that's even higher than anybody's got on a desktop. Then you've got low-res phones that are running, like 3GS runs at 320 by 240, I think. So, how do you make an app that looks good at 320 by 240 and also looks good at 2048 by whatever? That's definitely a challenge. The app stores, and this is probably the biggest one of all, the app stores are really hard for users to navigate. Pretty much they can click the search box and they type in one word, and that's what you get. So the search level sophistication is really not good. And unfortunately, most of the App Store content, they're searching on the device for your app. So the sad news for us is the first game we did was Hearts. And the keyword heart is used all over the place, not just for the card game Hearts. It's used for open heart surgery and have a heart and I love you and Bible and all sorts of stuff. So if you look for our app, if you type in Hearts, you won't even find our app. It's not even on page 20. It's just not even there. So that's pretty depressing. We've tried tweaking all sorts of things to get there, and there are some tricks and stuff that we've learned now since that can help with that. But at the end of the day, again, there's nobody you can call, nobody you can ask. You're pretty much at the mercy of what Apple and Google decide to do. App stores are typically very hit-driven because it is so crowded. And this is very different than I think most of you guys are used to in the Windows and the desktop space. Because the app stores are so filled with so much content and people generally aren't searching and the search isn't very effective, a lot of people are downloading and purchasing apps based on the top 100 lists. They go to the top free games, the top paid games, whatever your category is, they're going into that and looking at the top ones. So it's much more important in the mobile space. I can't emphasize this enough. It's much more important in the mobile space that your app reach those top lists. So it's that much more important because that's what's going to drive a lot of your traffic. People are going to go to top finance apps and they're going to pull up a list of the finance apps, and if you're not in the first couple pages, you're not going to do very well. So, and what that means is the sales also tend to drop very fast, because as soon as you get off that list, you suddenly no longer get those sales. So what you really want to do is put a big press campaign, a good effort to try and get a good, strong launch, and I talk about that actually on another slide, I guess, and then try and stay on that top list as long as you possibly can. This isn't just true of games. People thought this was true of only of games, but it's true just as much for other apps as it is for games. It's no different. And I think that's very different than, most of you guys are usually, people are searching to solve a problem, and they just don't really do that on mobile. Another thing that's a real challenge is it's really hard to get direct access to the customer. Google owns the customers, Apple owns the customers. You don't get email addresses. You can't get access to email addresses unless you do various things in your app and stuff, get them to register. It's very hard to do that. So when somebody buys your app, you're not going to get an email address. You're not even going to know that they bought your app. So all you know is at the end of the month, you're going to get a sales figure and a dollar check, and that's it. So this can be really frustrating if you're used to running a website and having those direct access to those customers that you can email and send out your newsletter and get them to buy the next product and so on. Much harder to do on mobile. Still possible, but harder to do. And probably the biggest trend right now is that freemium is really where all the mobile apps are going, which is what that means is the app is free, and then you buy add-on pieces, or somehow you buy extra content, which really ironically is a lot like shareware, sort of repackaged a little bit, right? Because actually Apple and Android both don't allow trial software on there. I forgot to mention that, but they don't allow trial software. But what you can have is you can have a free version, and in the case of a game, maybe at level 3, you only get the first 3 levels, and then you have to buy add-on levels. You could also do that with an app. I have actually seen some people that have tried doing time-limited or use-limited type things, and I don't think Apple allows it. So, although I saw one app that seemed like they somehow backdoored it, but for the most part, you can't do that. So that means you need to figure out some way to kind of pull the premium features of your product out and make those add-on pieces. And for us, that was a really hard thing to kind of wrap our brain around, because none of our games were level-based. We don't have, how do you break up a card game in pieces? And I don't know that we've still figured that out, but we've had some success. But one thing that is important to note is if you look at the 10 top revenue paying apps in the App Store, one thing that is cool is all this information for both the App Store and Google Play is freely available on your device and on the website, so you can just start looking and seeing who is making the most money. It's publicly available information. So 9 of the 10 top revenue apps right now are freemium. So what that means is the app itself is completely free. So I think like right now, I haven't checked in the last couple of days, but in recent memory, one of the top games was a game called Dragon Veil here by Backflip, which is actually in Boulder, Colorado. So I know the guys that do this. So this game is completely free, and you can play it all you want for free. But then if your eggs take time to hatch, and I probably don't have internet, so it's probably not going to let me in. But your eggs take time to hatch, and if you want it, it takes a long time, and if you're impatient, then you pay money basically to make your dragons go faster. Hello. Okay. Oh, it's out of battery. Awesome. Okay, well, I can talk loud.
Does it take double A?
I don't know. We're almost done here anyways. So, desktop versus mobile. So I've got a quick slide to show that. So this is our actual figures for our sales. This is kind of a depressing slide. I'm kind of embarrassed to show it, but here it is. So, so we actually changed our domain name in March and April, so you can see there was a huge drop there, which we're slowly recuperating. But you can see the green and the red little teeny slices on the top of there. That's our mobile revenue. Okay, so right now we're totally losing money on mobile. There's no question about it. We're kind of re-strategizing some things too, and part of it is the hearts because we chose a game that people can't find in the App Store. Part of it is that we're not doing things like we should be. So, but so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're changing and what I've learned. So as I mentioned earlier, you really need to plan and maximize your launch exposure. It's much more important. And I was actually, the Bits du Jour guy yesterday mentioned this in his talk too, that most of your sales should be on your launch day. And that was really cool to kind of hear that. That's certainly not been the case for our games in the past, but it's really especially important on mobile that you do that because of those top lists. You need to get in that list and stay in there as long as you can. Use your website to drive traffic to your app. This is something that we did not do or didn't do very well, and it really hurt us. Since nobody can find us in the search engine on the device, and we're not marketing our own apps very well on our own website, how are people going to find out about it? They aren't. And so that's why our sales have been pretty disappointing. So one of the things that we're working really hard towards is actually providing videos and demos and stuff on our website to drive traffic to your app. So think about, people are not going to find your app in App Store. Just assume right now that they're probably not going to find your app. So they're either going to find it in the top list, or they're going to find it through reviews and on your own website and the sort of more traditional channels that you've used in the past. So the good news is that all the stuff you've already learned about, pay-per-click and affiliates and other people you can still do all that stuff to drive traffic to your app. And you should be. If you have a desktop version, absolutely consider putting some kind of a banner ad or whatever, newsletters, all that kind of stuff, same kind of stuff to be promoting your app, just like you would. And that you really have to do that. You can't just plop it in the App Store and expect it to sell, which is kind of what we did. Two things. One thing that's really will be helpful is to use Dropbox and TestFlight to push your builds. Dropbox does file sharing, but it's also really great for Android. I can go over here to our build server. Our build server automatically uploads our builds to Dropbox. I go to Dropbox and just pull a build down and run it on my phone, which is great. I can call my developer and say, hey, make a change, and go over my phone and pull it down while I'm remote and test it out. That's really great. Because you don't want to be sitting there having USB cables for 17 devices on your PC, and it just gets very annoying very fast. And then TestFlight is an app that lets you do the iOS stuff and handles the all that provisioning profile certification stuff, which I could spend an hour talking just about that. It makes that way, way easier. So if you want to have beta testers test your app on iOS, you have to use TestFlight pretty much. This is something we're working towards changing, which is having a web version of our app and or a video demo of our app on our site. So that people, again, they search for your app and they can kind of see what it looks like on their device without actually buying it. And this is especially true if it's a freemium app. Obviously, they can download your app and try it out and then pay for it. But if they have to pay up front, how are they going to know if they like your product or not? So you really need to have some kind of a web or video demo of your app so they can see how it works. Another thing that we've done very well in the past, which we will hopefully be using more in the future here, is cross-promoting our products and platforms. So we have banner ads for the in-app purchasable stuff in the game. When we added that, our in-app purchase rate went up like 5x. It made a huge difference. So not only do we show banners for other people, because the money you get from banner ads is not very significant. So if you can monetize that in a better way, like promoting your own stuff or upselling them on features in your game or your app, it's a much better use of that space. One thing we're also really exploring into, which we aren't using yet, but is using something like Urban Airship, which lets you do push messaging to your user base. So one of the things I mentioned is you don't have those email addresses, right, for your customers. So how do I notify them? I'd like to have a sale. Maybe I want to have this week. I want to have, our cheats ad on sale half price this week. There's no way for me to tell my users other than putting it on my website. So Urban Airship lets you have a way to basically do push messages to your clients. And so those of you that may have mobile devices and use something like Groupon or Living Social or Facebook even, those all use similar push messaging technology that'll pop up little spammy type ads on your, on your thing telling you, hey, you've got a new Groupon or whatever. Well, you could do the same thing and pop up a little message saying, hey, whatever's on sale this week, or hey, we just released a new app, you want to check it out, etc. And that's something that I think really getting that right makes a huge difference in your revenue.
So that ad appears when they play the game? The game looks for a message?
There's two different things here. So we have banner ads in our games because they're freemium, and the banner ads rotate through both paid banner ad network ads as well as our own ads. So our own ads either upsell in-app purchasable items that they can buy in the game, or they upsell other apps like our poker guide or whatever. And we get a lot of traffic actually just from the cross promotion of our games. So and you could even use this, I could actually even see this as being effective to potentially put out a mobile, and this is something that could work very well for you guys, put out a mobile app that is free and use it as sort of a loss leader to get people in. Consider it another way basically to advertise and get customers. So if you were to have a mobile app that maybe was a quick little utility that linked well into your desktop product somehow, that could be a great way to get yourself exposed to a new set of customers, because they download your free app that I know one of the guys was talking about, he did countertop stuff, and I was like, wow, it'd be really cool if I could take a picture, of my kitchen and get some idea of what my, rough cost on my countertop, redoing my countertops might be. Because there's been some really cool mobile apps that do stuff like that, and then that would be a great lead-in, I could see, to actually selling his full product where he, estimates everything and gets you measurements and all that kind of stuff. So you could use the mobile app as a tie-in to sort of get that done. So that's the one thing. The second thing, Urban Airship is a totally different thing, and that's about doing push messaging. And so it basically allows your app to send messages out to devices. So I can say, send a message out to everybody who has Championship Hearts installed with this. So it's a way to basically contact your customers, because you don't have their email addresses, so you can't email them unless you figure out another way to do it. You can't do that directly. So push messaging would let you do that, because you'd be able to send a push message out to them to notify them of a new app release or an upgrade or a discount or something.
So if you have the Urban Airship, when they're playing the app, will this notification of a 1-week special appear?
No, that comes up no matter what. Their app, as long as they don't turn off push notification on their device, they'll get push notifications all the time. It's almost like sending an email. They'll get a little pop-up message. I mean, those of you that use Facebook, you get little, blah, blah, blah posted about you and liked whatever. It's kind of like that. So your app doesn't even need to be running. They could just have their device and a little pop-up message will come up saying, there's a new Groupon and whatever, and blah, blah, blah has a sale this week. I mean, you have to be careful. It's too spammy, then the users may block you or shut you down, because they can turn those off on a per app basis too if they want to. So
your customer has to subscribe to Urban Airship to get the message?
Well, Urban Airship is a third-party tool that allows you to do the push notifications yourself. You can try and do it yourself, but it would be very hard to do that. Urban Airship is an SDK or a third-party tool that lets you do push messaging easily. So you can just go to the website and say, hey, I want to blast out my customers, bam. Just go to the website, fill in a little field, bam, it's sent. So it's a nice product. We're not currently using it in our apps, but we definitely want to be. Oh, okay.
Give it to you for you?
Oh, sure. I'm almost done anyways, but I'm loud, right? Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, David. And then the other thing you might can do is consider some kind of login so you can capture that email address. Is there some way, if you've got a connection to your desktop app, it could be a great way. Maybe they need to register to get access to the database, or to, a lot of people do this to connect to social media, or to have some sort of persistent information stored. They do that on their
scores.
I'm sorry?
Submitting high scores.
Submitting high scores, exactly, all that kind of stuff. So if you can come up with some kind of excuse or reason, thank you, for them, if you can come up with some kind of excuse, hello, oh, there we go. So yeah, so if you can come up with some kind of excuse or reason to get that login with your email address, huge win. So when you're designing your mobile app, try and think, is there a way I can connect that up and get that email address? I mean, if you just prompt with their email address, you don't have any good reason for it, then they're gonna be like, what the hell? So you need to kind of have a good reason for it, and you might want to delay it and let them use the app initially before you sort of acquire that. So, but some things actually you do like an account creation step or something like that. So, and then my last comment too is that consider how your audience may change. In our case, our audience is actually fairly old. Most of our customers are like 40 to 70 or 80. We have a lot of seniors that play our games, a lot of older soccer moms and that kind of thing. And going mobile, how does that change? We definitely have a younger audience on mobile than we do on our desktop games. And so, for example, we kind of ignored social media before, and now on mobile, that's not an option. We have to be out there on social media. So in summary, mobile is clearly the future. I don't think you can ignore it given the expanding base of that. I don't think desktop's going anywhere. But the mobile market's going to become such a big player. I don't think it's something you can just sort of continue to ignore if you haven't been this far. Consider doing some kind of mobile web or HTML5 app. Maybe that's a good stepping stone for you. It'd be a lot easier to develop, and you can leverage the existing skill set you've already got. PhoneGap and Unity are both good choices if you actually want to try and do a standalone game. Keep in mind that there's new devices, new tools, new languages to learn. I mean, when we initially went to the mobile here, I was shocked because pretty much everything I knew was almost useless. I was learning a new game engine, a new language, a new platform, a new compiler. I mean, it's like everything was new. Usually I try and change one or two things at a time instead of bam, a whole bunch. So it's exciting, but it is also a struggle. There's going to be a learning curve. There certainly was for me. The app stores are crowded, and it's going to be really hard to stand out. I know I said that several times, but that's the reality. So, you got to accept that and figure out how are you going to stand out. And then the thing that I'm really excited about, and I'm really interested more, is how I think mobile can be a great advertising tool. Not necessarily thinking of mobile as, okay, I'm going to nuke my desktop version and move all my stuff mobile, or I'm going to create a mobile version. It's the same thing I've got on desktop, but it's going to be mobile instead. Think of mobile as another vehicle to getting advertising and marketing out to your customers. Can you create some sort of small tool or helpful thing that will bring in new customers and also add value to your current customers? Think of mobile maybe as slightly more of a loss leader platform than to get people to the desktop product that makes your bread and butter. And the last thing is I'm just going to pimp my own Kickstarter project. So I've been working on a game called Alpha Colony, which is an economic simulation sort of similar to SimCity and Civilization. And this is something I've been wanting to do for like 15 years, and I'm finally doing it now. So we launched on Kickstarter. We actually just ended like 2 or 3 hours ago. And we did fall short of our goal. We were trying to raise $500,000, which is a little aggressive. And we kind of screwed up some things. And so we actually have a great article on 20 ways to screw your Kickstarter project, which has gotten a lot of views. So if you want to learn about what not to do on Kickstarter, by all means, let my lessons be helpful to you. We did do several things right too. We're going to be doing a second Kickstarter. We did manage to raise $100,000 in a month. So we're going to do another Kickstarter in a more less ambitious level, scale back the project. And alphacolony.com is the main website for that. So we're going to be launching it again in early August, and I definitely would love to get support from you guys on that. And with that, I'll open up the floor to questions. Yep.
Is the presentation available for download online? I just tried it.
Yes, I will make it available online. I guess, John, are we going to post those somewhere?
We'll have them available to all conferences and meets, and eventually we'll have it available to more people. We're just still trying to figure out the details of how. But
okay. Well, my Twitter is Spadesmaster, so you can Twitter me for the slides. I'd be happy to send them to you. And my email address is chrisw@dreamquestgames.com. And I'll be happy to give you a card. And if you want to just give me your card and write down the slides on it, I'll be happy to email you the slides as well. So a whole bunch of other hands. John Rocco?
you mentioned how you basically had to learn everything again going to mobile. How long did it take you? I mean, I know it's going to be always a constant thing, but how long was it before you felt, now I have a base to work from?
So John Margo's question was, how long did it take me to kind of get over that learning curve of all the new tools? I'll let you know when I get there.
Okay.
No, that's a smart-ass answer. I'd probably say about 6 months is kind of where I felt like I was productive again. I mean, the tool set was somewhat the easy part. The business model part was the part that I honestly wasn't prepared for. I figured, well, I'll just create a great app and throw it in the App Store and people will buy it, right? No. I mean, because that's how we've gotten most of our traffic from organic search engine stuff. People search for Hearts, they find us, they our game looks awesome, they play it, they like it, they buy it. I thought I could just do the same thing on mobile and it would work, and not so much. So, although I hope our other games that are more searchable will probably do better. We'll see. I'll tell you in a couple more weeks. Yes, fine.
I have done some PHP in the past, so the accelerator, whatever it's called, would be more appropriate for me. How does that compare to what was the one, Unity?
Well, PhoneGap, I think, would be Unity's really a game engine, so PhoneGap and AppCelerator are very similar. And yes, AppCelerator does support PHP. I believe AppCelerator actually they have sort of a web pushing sort of client-server-ish solution. And they have more of a standalone solution. I think the standalone solution does not support PHP. I think that's only for their sort of like cloud-based service. Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with AppCelerator as I am with PhoneGap. But yeah, if you know PHP, I definitely, AppCelerator would probably be a good choice for you to look at. One thing that actually is a plus, AppCelerator actually does a lot of training, and they do conferences, and you can go and get like a week, crash course in AppCelerator and stuff. And that was one thing that was a big plus for me. I actually learned AppCelerator first, and then switched over to PhoneGap. But if you're looking for sort of an instant solution, like I'm just going to go pay and go for a week over here and come back an AppCelerator guru, that may be a big plus for you. Whereas PhoneGap is a little more of a hacker community kind of mindset. Some other questions back, Phil?
Yeah, two questions. One, revenue model. We're switching some of our stuff from paid to we're doing in-app advertising. We definitely see we're making more money when we do free with in-app advertising than when we're doing paid. What did you see? Which ones are you using? What's working best for you?
Well, we kind of didn't have a choice, I felt, honestly. If I could have gotten away with selling our apps for $7.99 or something like that on mobile, I probably would have. But the game space, that's really hard to justify unless you've got a huge brand name. That's really hard to do. So, and I'm like, screw this. There's no way I'm selling my app for 99 cents that I busted my ass for a month, for a year building this thing, and I'm going to sell it for 99 cents. So I said, if I'm going to do that, I might as well do free, and try and get them to upgrade. The good news is actually, even as bad as our exposure has been, as far as downloads, because nobody can find our app, the conversion rate has actually been quite strong. So if we can keep, we've been able to convert about 5 to 10% of our customers are buying the add-ons, which is a pretty high number.
Are you making more for that or more from the advertising?
Well, the advertising doesn't make any significant money. The only ads that make money are iAds. So if you're talking about revenue from banner ads specifically, iAds are where 90% of your money is from. So you want to be on iOS, especially iPad. iPad ads pay well. Smartphone ads, not as much. So you can get pretty good, and I'm sorry I don't have any stats, I should, but iPad ads make 5x what you're going to make on an iPhone or an Android. So if you're trying to target mobile ads, you definitely want to be on iPad. And you definitely want to be targeting iAds as your primary platform. We are using a banner ad aggregator called MoPub, which I've been pretty happy with. And they sort of aggregate iAds and AdMob and several ad networks together. And you can tweak it and so on. And honestly, we've been, there's been the money from that's been not so great, so I haven't really focused a lot of my energy on it. But it does make me a couple bucks a day, and when we get all 12 of our apps done, and a bigger market share, it'll still be worth doing. For me, the ads are more of something to get them to disable it, so they could then pay the $2.99 to disable the ads, which is what a lot of games do. They put the ads in, not so much to make revenue, but mostly so they'll pay to get rid of them.
One more question.
Sure.
Were you just doing English language versions, or have you done other languages as well?
Right now, we're just doing English language versions. We had some discussion, particularly for Alpha Colony. If we do Alpha Colony, we'll definitely be doing several different languages for it. Card games are kind of tricky because they're cultural. It's not just a language issue. It's that people in Japan don't play hearts. Although lots of people in Germany play spades and euchre and stuff. So that's an area where honestly we haven't done very well. We probably should have more localizations than we do.
One thing we found, we were a lot more successful in non-English markets and really taking that top spot in the App Store, and we make a lot more money in non-English markets. And we're actually releasing our first Chinese app. I don't know how that's going to go, but I'll let you know next year.
Yeah, that's funny. Now that you mention it, because I do get back. We're like top categories, you know, we're like #1 in like Finland or something. I have no idea. I don't know why. I guess people play hearts in Finland, and I never knew. You know, and maybe it's just because the card game category, the market's so much more niche that, you know, if there's like 3 people playing hearts in Finland, suddenly I'm dominating the card game category. I don't know. But you know, yeah, I think there's definitely a potential there. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys all for coming.